And welcome back to Musina. And we are, of course, here for the official launch, so to speak, of the Border Management Authority. So you heard earlier from the Minister of Home Affairs, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, in whose department, of course, this entity had previously been incubated. And then, of course, you know, we look at the land borders and we understand that we have some 52 of those in the country. And altogether, there are 73. And we will be speaking to Dr. Nakampe Masiapato, who is, of course, Commissioner of the Border Management Authority, just to tell us more about the operational issues that his entity will have to deal with. And it is, of course, much about the integration of various departments and making sure that we now have one entity that all of the officials will report to. And we're going to talk about some of the issues, including crime and the like. But we're not here alone. We have a team fanned out. There's a team that's going right up to the border post where President Cyril Ramaphosa will, of course, later on this morning be speaking to the media, but also engaging with his counterparts from across the Limpopo River. But our reporters who've been on the ground here, Masako Kumane is here, Michael Makungo from radio, he also is here. And excuse me, they are, of course, people on the beat who tend to see the things that we talk about on a daily basis. Masako, good to be with you here in Musina. Don't know how you guys do it with the heat this early in the morning, but we live. Besides the heat, though, you know, this morning we were up very early and already took a drive down to the border post just to have a look at the activity that's taking place, because the launch of the Border Management Authority is about basically eradicating a lot of the illicit activity that's taking place along this borderline. But from your observation, from working in this area, how would you say things have improved, especially since the Border Management Authority was launched in April and since last year when those 200 guards were deployed?
Yes, good morning and welcome, Sakina. Nice to have you here on the ground with us. I mean, you're correct. Limpopo is, province that we find ourselves working at, especially here. We also do come here when there's, a lot of activity, especially leading into that festive season. But, we were here during the course of this week. We had engagements with locals. There's no better person to tell you what's happening in their community other than locals, people that, will share with you their lived experiences of what they are seeing. When you come here, obviously when we come here officially, and there's a certain type of movement that you follow. But when you speak to people that live around here, but also, I'm sure I saw you earlier on was speaking with Minister of Home Affairs, who also used to be Minister of, Health not so long ago, would tell you about what's happening at the Musina hospital. That also gives you an indication and an idea of the movement that is happening, that which you don't necessarily document what is happening in terms of people moving in and out of the country. That gives an indication of what is it that's happening in the South African borders, but also just some of the pictures and the work also that has been done by other colleagues as well, in the Limpopo province within the SABC previously, years even before I found myself in this particular region, was you would see the Limpopo River is quite an interesting mode of transport, if you want to call it that. In terms of the guards that have been deployed by the BMA, I think what perhaps should be happening is we should be seeing more of those coming in, and it will be interesting to hear from Dr. Masiapato what is the plan of having more people on the ground. That's what we also spoke with. What locals are saying is that they want to see that fence that must go up, so that there actually is a border that you can say this is where South Africa begins and ends, if you may call it that, in this particular area. But there's many dynamics to border crossing as well. Some people come in for the day and leave. There are issues of documentation there. Then I think the greater problem here, as you were saying, is the illicit activity that takes place here. The cars that not only here actually in Musina, here at Bait Bridge that cross the country. If you go to Limpopo as well, there are issues there I personally, we have a story as a family. My mom was hijacked a few years ago. Her car was found in Maputo a few months later. So it's not only just us, but a lot of South Africans have lived experiences of what happens when it's difficult to, contain movement of people coming in and goods out of the border. But we also know this is also another route. Every other week you would see police in the province taking out releases of how many people or how many illicit cigarettes they caught. I mean, people moving in that trade or trucks moving in and out of this border in terms of that illicit cigarette trade. So there's quite a lot as well, commercial crimes, if you may call them that take place, but also just that illegality as well. But also, I mean, this has also got a ripple effect because people come in here. What happens when you commit a crime and we don't even know who you are? We don't know where you come from. We can't trace you. And also leads to people that come in and say they're going to stay, but they're not really, well, they're not going to stay for a certain amount of time. The next thing, marriages pop up at home office. There's just so many issues that surround what happens at these South African borders that have a ripple effect as to, where we find ourselves as a country. We spoke about the hospitals, what's happening there in terms of healthcare, the strain on the healthcare system, but also the illicit goods that come in commercially. Are we getting revenue from that? There's so much that happens at these borders, Sakina.
And I think that sets us up nicely to bring Dr. Mike Masiapato, the Commissioner of the Border Management Authority, to answer some of these questions of what Mahlako has just highlighted. And Dr. Masiapato is already here, so I'm just going to move across to him. And before I even start this conversation with Dr. Masiapato, I'm looking at some cars, and these, I understand, have just been abandoned. So at some point, the authorities will, I suppose, have to deal with them. You can see some in not great condition, so you would imagine they're not even roadworthy. But these are the sort of activities. So this is just here at the weighbridge, the border inspection, cross-border inspection weighbridge, just before you get to the actual border post. Dr. Masiapato, thanks so much for speaking to us this morning. So, Mahlako mentions quite a few issues that you are aware of. But let's start at the beginning, or maybe with the most pertinent issue. The residents want to know, when are you going to put up a fence? Because we know South Africans have already paid for a fence. Millions of rands for a fence that does not exist. So let's start with the fence to actually demarcate where the one country starts and the other one ends.
Thank you very much, Sakina. Maybe the first thing to indicate is that the issue of the fence, as you will fairly be aware, it is something that has been handled by the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure. Unfortunately, on the basis of whoever got the tender at the time was not able to deliver according to the requirements. And I think we do know that subsequently the Special Investigating Unit had to investigate that particular contract. And as we speak, they are busy trying to get the money back from the person who was supposed to do the work and did not do it accordingly. So to that extent, I can only indicate that SIU, once all of those processes are done, I suppose the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure will be able to recoup the money and ultimately be able to come and assist us. But in the bigger, longer-term context, as you will be aware, we have issued out the request for proposal for the private sector markets to come and help us to redesign and redevelop our top 6 commercial ports, which Bay Bridge is one of those. So during that process of redesigning, redeveloping, and ultimately, building a new infrastructure in the space, we are supposed to then infuse with that work of developing the actual borderline to be able to deal with the issues here.
Okay, let's break that down into 2 questions. Firstly, when you say we are now waiting for the SIU to recoup the monies before Public Works can once again erect a fence, how does that impact on the Border Management Authority's operations at this particular border post? Because in the absence of the fence, does that not complicate your activities, your life as a Border Management Authority?
Yeah, no, indeed. I mean, from where we are sitting now, the way in which things are, it is very much difficult. I mean, we have tried, obviously, to deploy the border guards here after we have launched them last year on the 14th of July. But still, on the basis of the issue that there's no fence, especially around the port itself, because that is where the key issue is, we still continue to have a lot of people wanting to actually subvert, because people don't have passports and therefore they want to come buy things. Others, obviously, are criminal elements. But because of that reality, they keep on, in other words, it is very much difficult, to be honest. So that is why ultimately when we can be able to get to that point where all of those processes are concluded and then the new border fence is built, that will make our work easier as the Border Management Authority.
But do you have a timeline as the Border Management Authority? Because it can't be an indefinite wait. We heard from Minister of Home Affairs a further 400 guards will be inaugurated here today. But how is that going to assist if, in fact, you are unable to secure the perimeter?
Yeah, you see, the issue of the perimeter, honestly, Sakina, for now, I do not have necessarily the timelines within the context of the process that I've defined between the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure and the Special Investigating Unit. But in terms of the request for proposal that has been issued under the Minister of Home Affairs, as you will remember, it was even in a media briefing 3 weeks ago, the timeline there in terms of the kickstarting of the redesigning processes and all of those, the closing date for the request for proposal is the 4th of March next year, which means that by next year around this time, we should start seeing some bit of changes in terms of the infrastructure development around the port. And in there, I just suppose that we will be able to then have that convergence between the issue of the redevelopment as well as the issue of the border fence.
With regard to the public or private-public partnership, how is that going to work? You know, because in terms of who will be responsible for what is the vision here?
No, you see, the vision, Sakina, it is something that is being used by a number of countries throughout the world, especially when it comes to issues of infrastructure development. It is very much clear that, the fiscus is not that stable to be able to handle all of these issues by itself. And that is why in the current, even in the broader community of nations out there, there is an enhanced movement towards the public-private partnerships. So in that instance, we are also going to do the same. What it means is they are going to come through, they are going to help us to redesign, redevelop, and then build infrastructure. And ultimately, they will do the maintenance of the infrastructure. As the Border Management Authority, then we come in and we use the infrastructure. Because remember, they will come and put technology like your number plate detectors. They're going to come and put the gamma rays for the purposes of scanning the trucks and all of those kind of issues. And then we come in, we operate the infrastructure. And we are then going to be kind of paying back for their development over time. That is either in the context of the concession, in the context of some tolling where they will get their money back, or through other means. And all of those issues are being dealt with the National Treasury to ultimately come with the final decision in terms of how the repayment is going to be done. But in terms of the development itself, it's just a basic public-private partnership that is going to be taking place.
And that's the Border Management Authority Commissioner, Dr. Mike Masiapato. But of course, we're going to come back to Dr. Masiapato because I want to speak to him about the movement of people for the purposes of trade. He spoke about the various activities. Matako also talked about it. So how are they going to deal with this in order to deal with the criminal element as they cross the border as well?